Okay, I wanted to give a few comments on our online discussion that we had. First of all, for the first one, it was very good, but I just thought I'd share some comments about how we could perhaps improve, especially the initial posting that you might make. This may not apply to all the postings that you make, but especially your first response, or at least your first sharing of your thoughts for the topic. So I'm just going to title this Dilemma Discussions, if you will, and how to build and consider another person's argument, how to build your own argument and consider another person's argument. So in our situation, we had, in essence, the question, what should Connor do? With regards to the safety procedures and whether to enforce them or not. So a typical comment that usually people make on these online discussions is just simply respond with saying, well, Connor should enforce the safety protocol because if he does, he can help the company avoid a lawsuit. Well, so if you're looking at that and you say, well, okay, I'm going to respond to that person's comment, there's several different ways in which you can respond to that particular comment because, as I'll point out, this comment isn't the strongest comment, kind of a basic comment, but you can respond to this particular comment in certain ways. As I said, I'm going to address how to make the initial comment better, but let me first talk about how you can respond to something like that. Well, one way to respond is just simply to challenge the assumed belief. Now, the initial comment didn't necessarily clearly state what the assumed belief is, but it's kind of implied in this. So the conclusion says, well, he should enforce it because it'll help the company avoid a lawsuit. Well, implied in that statement is that that somehow managers' right and wrong is found in protecting the company, right? And so maybe what you say is, well, is Connor's only responsibility to the company itself, and therefore his only responsibility is to help the company avoid a lawsuit, or is there perhaps he has some other responsibilities beyond that? And so maybe what you can do is say, hold on a second, I kind of think a manager has more responsibilities than just simply avoiding a lawsuit for the company. He may have responsibilities towards the employees, responsibilities to their customers, responsibilities to society, things like that. So you can kind of challenge the assumed belief. And again, you kind of have to, in this case, because of the way the comment was made, you have to kind of assume what you think is the belief because it's kind of implied. Another thing you can do, or I guess you can say, well, wait a second, this comment assumes that there's no individual liberty for the employees themselves, and so you might want to question, well, wait a second, don't employees have liberty? Don't they have the right to choose for themselves? And so if we force them to follow these safety procedures, are we infringing upon their personal liberty, the right to choose whether or not they themselves want to follow procedures that protect them or not? Maybe they are willing to take their lives in their own hands, if you will. Another way you can respond is just find fault in the application of the belief. So in other words, you might say, well, yeah, I do agree that managers have the responsibility to help the company avoid lawsuits, but hold on a second. If Connor is to look out for the interests of the company, shouldn't he do what he can to ensure that they fulfill the contract? Because the avoiding of a lawsuit is, in essence, you're saying he has a responsibility to look out for the interests of the company. Well, if they can't fulfill the contract that they had, and it seems as though it's kind of difficult for them to do that if they enforce the safety procedures. So if they enforce the safety procedures, yeah, they might avoid a potential lawsuit, but at the same time, they may not be able to fulfill the contract, and so they lose the contract, and that's problematic for the company. So again, this is just an example of finding fault with the application of the belief. And a third way you can respond is just simply challenging the assumptions that one makes. So, for example, you might say, well, okay, this comment assumed that employees will file a lawsuit, and it assumes that there would actually be merit to the lawsuit. The problem is that may not be the case. Both of those assumptions can be challenged. First of all, maybe an employee doesn't follow a lawsuit. Maybe an employee says, you know, it's my choice not to follow the safety procedures, and so therefore, you know, I'm at fault and the company's not, and so therefore I'm just not going to go through with it. Or they might say, you know, I'm not going to go through the hassle of finding a lawyer. I still think the company's at fault, but I don't have money for a lawyer, and so therefore I'm not going to go to a lawsuit. Or even if they did, it may be the case where the courts find that there's zero merit to the employee's claim. because, again, if this company has stated policies and the employee chose not to follow those policies, then the court might just say, you know what, there's no merit to their claim, and so therefore they're not going to go forward with this lawsuit. So you can kind of challenge the assumptions. So 3 ways to respond to someone's comment: challenge the assumed belief, find the fault in the application, or even challenge their assumptions. So then the question is, how do we make a comment better? Well, before I go to that, so here's the problems with this argument as it was stated. So first of all, it only presents a very simplistic conclusion. In fact, it kind of just jumped to the conclusion. Well, Connor should do whatever. That's jumping to the conclusion. You're jumping to the conclusion without actually building an argument, right? And that conclusion is not really grounded in any particular moral philosophy. Now, we can imply one, but we're not sure exactly what moral philosophy is driving this comment. And then finally, the third problem is it just simply did not address potential counter arguments or other viewpoints. Some that I've already brought up, like, well, what about the employee's responsibility? Or what about the manager's responsibility beyond protecting against lawsuits and things like that? So perhaps a better way to form an argument is to go and apply the 3-step formula that I talked about in the video titled What is Morality? So basically, you follow these 3 steps. You state your basic belief, then you apply that belief to the case at hand, and then you draw a conclusion. So for example, maybe your comment would be, okay, I believe that people have inherent rights, which means we have a duty to protect and honor those rights. Therefore, I think employees have a right to safe work, and they also have a duty to protect themselves. Likewise, others, like managers, have a duty not to allow harm to occur to their employees of the company. Well, based on those beliefs and that application, I believe the company should establish safety procedures and encourage employees to follow them. And likewise, employees should follow them, since that's in their own best interest. Now, we can argue that. So basically, what you see here on the right-hand side of this slide, if you put all those together, now I wouldn't, in my comment, I wouldn't actually write basic belief or application or conclusion. I would just put all that into one paragraph, but I wanted you to see the 3 different steps. So now, this isn't an ironclad argument, but it's a little bit more robust than just simply saying, well, Connor should do this so that they avoid lawsuits. Now, again, responding to this, you can challenge my basic belief, you can challenge my application, you can challenge my conclusions, and so therefore further comments might be those challenges. But this might help for a more initial robust comment, and hopefully will help us with the discussions that we have related to these ethical dilemmas. Good job for the first week. Looking forward to our future conversations in weeks to come.